Former Trump White House chief strategist Stephen Bannon's appeal has been denied. He is now being ordered to report to prison to serve a 4-month sentence for a contempt of Congress charge, which just so happens to be in time for some more election interference. Now, this is from Reuters. This is Andrew Goudsword's article. He writes, Trump ally Bannon ordered to report to prison for defying January 6th probe. Steve Bannon, a former top advisor to Donald Trump, must report to prison by July 1st to serve a 4-month sentence for a contempt of Congress, a federal judge has said on Thursday. The decision means Bannon, a right-wing media firebrand who maintains influence in Trump's orbit, will likely be behind bars for the critical stretch of the U.S. presidential campaign as former President Trump faces Democratic President Joe Biden in the November 5th election. Amazing how the timing of all these cases just so happens to be during the peak presidential election season. Anyway, he goes on to write that the order by U.S. District Judge Carl Nichols in Washington came after a federal appeals court last month rejected Biden's bid to overturn his conviction for spurning a subpoena from a congressional panel that investigated the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol. Bannon was convicted in 2022 of 2 misdemeanor counts of contempt of Congress for refusing to turn over documents or testify to the Democratic-led House of Representatives committee. Bannon will be the second former top official from Trump's White House to go to prison for refusing to cooperate with the committee. Peter Navarro, the former trade advisor, is currently serving a 4-month term as well. Bannon was allowed to avoid serving his sentence during the appeal, and prosecutors then moved to end that reprieve after the 3-judge panel of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit rebuffed Bannon's challenge to his conviction. So, basically what's happening here is this. Back in 2021, the House Select Committee issued a subpoena to Bannon, and they were demanding that he provide them documents and a deposition surrounding both the January 6th incident as well as the 2020 presidential election itself. Bannon, at the time a private citizen, did not comply with either request. He cited executive privilege concerns raised by President Donald Trump. So, the House responded by holding Bannon in contempt of Congress for his noncompliance. Shortly thereafter, the DOJ would indict Bannon back on November 12th of 2021 on 2 counts of criminal contempt of Congress. 1 for failing to produce documents and 2 for failing to appear for the deposition. They put him on trial, and by July of 2022, the prosecution succeeded in churning out guilty verdicts on both counts. He was then sentenced to 4 months in prison and fined $6,500. However, the sentence was stayed pending appeal. And so Bannon appealed. He argued that he acted based on legal advice and that executive privilege concerns justified his noncompliance. His defense centered on the claim that he was acting on the advice of his attorney and that executive privilege invoked by Trump prevented him from complying with the subpoena. His legal team argued that he believed he was legally justified in his actions and that the trial court improperly excluded evidence supporting this defense. The prosecutors, though, argued that Bannon willfully ignored the subpoena and that his reasons for noncompliance, well, they were irrelevant under the law. And by May of this year, a 3-judge panel of the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals upheld Bannon's conviction, rejecting his arguments. Now, Bannon, who no longer worked in the White House at the time, was part of a group of Trump advisors who sought to derail former certification of Biden's victory in the 2020 election. This is why the congressional panel was after him. They said that he may have had knowledge of events planned for January 6th. Now, Bannon would not take this lying down, and he had some sharp words to say, and this is how it sounded.
We're going to go all the way to the Supreme Court if we have to, but I want to say something specifically about the Justice Department. Merrick Garland, Lisa Monaco, the entire Justice Department, they're not going to shut up Trump. They're not going to shut up Navarro. They're not going to shut up Bannon, and they're certainly not going to shut up MAGA. If you look right here, you reporters, in the 2.5 or 3 years we've been here, look at the rise of MAGA. Look at the rise of Donald Trump. If the election was held today, according to Harry Eden over at CNN, President Trump would win in a landslide. All of this, besides the major legal issues that have to be addressed, all of this is about one thing. This is about shutting down the MAGA movement, shutting down grassroots conservatives, shutting down President Trump. Not only are we winning, we are going to prevail, and every number and every poll shows that. There's nothing that can shut me up and nothing that will shut me up. There's not a prison built or a jail built that will ever shut me up. All victory to MAGA. We're going to win this. We're going to win at the Supreme Court. And more importantly, we're going to win on November 5th in an amazing landslide with the Senate, the House, and also Donald J. Trump back as President of the United States. Thank you very much.
Now, my friends, in an era of what is now becoming known as lawfare, which means the use of legal systems and institutions that are designed to damage or delegitimize an opponent or to deter someone's usage of their legal rights, we find ourselves having to take a closer look at these instances of the justice system, meting out jail time to opponents of the current regime like candy. You see, historically, jail time for contempt of Congress has been exceedingly rare. The more common punishment has been fines, or just no punishment at all, especially in recent decades. I'll give you some examples. First, let's talk about Eric Holder. Remember him? He was this is back in 2012, he was the then Attorney General, and he was held in contempt of Congress for failing to provide documents related to the Fast and Furious gun-running investigation. Basically, the federal government was giving guns to criminals in Mexico. That was the charge. Now, the outcome of all of this was the House of Representatives held him in contempt, Holder, but he was not prosecuted or jailed. The Obama administration would cite executive privilege over the documents in question, and they just sort of left them off the hook. Then we have 2014. This is Lois Lerner. She was the former IRS official, and she was held in contempt of Congress for refusing to testify about the IRS's targeting of conservative groups. What do you suppose her outcome was? Well, she did get her contempt by the House, but the Department of Justice declined to prosecute her, and she didn't face any jail time. Then you have Harriet Miers and Joshua Bolten. This is 2007. Harriet Miers was a former White House counsel, and Joshua Bolten was a former White House chief of staff. They were both held in contempt for refusing to comply with subpoenas related to the dismissal of U.S. attorneys. The House voted to hold them in contempt, but the Department of Justice didn't pursue charges, and they did not serve jail time. And then I'll give you one more example. This is going back a ways. This is 1998, Janet Reno. She was the then Attorney General. She was held in contempt for not providing documents related to campaign finance investigations. The House voted to hold Reno in contempt, but she was not prosecuted or jailed, because why would she, right? The matter was resolved through negotiations instead. The bottom line is this. Jail time is possible in these cases, but they are very, very rare. Contempt of Congress, it is a federal misdemeanor, which is punishable by a fine of up to $100,000 and imprisonment for up to 1 year. Okay? However, actual jail sentences have been very, very, very rare. The last time a person was actually jailed for contempt of Congress was back in the 1970s during the Watergate scandal. That's how long it's been. Now you've got Peter Navarro and Stephen Bannon. Usually what happens here is you have contempt citations, and they lead to convictions, and the punishment is usually a fine. That's it. The Biden administration has used their federal government to consolidate power by using said power to intimidate and ruin anyone who would dare stand in their way. We live in a day and age where gone is the society that once was able to vehemently disagree with itself in the political arena and yet live together in harmony as a whole. Instead, this has been replaced with the largely unprosecuted violence from the left, and I'm of course referring to the hate groups Antifa and BLM, with their largest mass riot in U.S. history and almost no one receiving any sort of punishment for this. While anyone on the right who steps out of line too far, they will get ruined. We've seen this both on the streets and in the courts at every turn. We are living on the edge of a knife here. One way or the other, we're going to shift in one direction, I believe. This election season will define what our generation will be known for, and it will decide what sort of culture that we will have in the future. From the To Be Frank show, I am Adrian. Thanks for watching, my friends. I will see you all in the next video.